My name is Tori Afton. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how the man who promised me the world tried to leave me with nothing. I still remember the exact moment I walked into Solaritech for the first time. It was a Monday morning in March. The sun was hitting the glass doors of that shiny headquarters, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is where I build my future. I had been job hunting for months, not because I couldn't find work, but because I was looking for something real, something that would value me. And when I met Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Solaritech, I thought I had found exactly that. Marcus was charming, the kind of charming that makes you feel safe. He leaned back in his leather chair during my final interview and said, "Tori, I don't just want employees, I want family. I want people who bleed for this company, and in return, I will take care of you for life." I was 29 years old, young, ambitious, and desperate to believe in something bigger than myself. I took the job. For the first 2 years, it was everything I had dreamed of. I worked in human resources and training development. My job was to design onboarding programs, leadership workshops, and technical training for new hires. And I was good at it, really good. Within 18 months, I had reduced new employee turnover by 40%. I created a training manual that became the gold standard across the entire industry. Other companies tried to poach me, but I turned them all down. Why? Because Marcus had made me a promise. He sat me down in his office one afternoon, just the two of us, and said, "Tori, you are the backbone of this company. I want you to lead the biggest project we've ever attempted. We're expanding to 3 new cities. That means hiring and training 300 new staff members. I need someone to build the entire training ecosystem from scratch. I need you." He paused, looked me right in the eyes, and added, "And when this is done, I'm promoting you to Vice President of Operations. Plus, I'm doubling your pension contribution. You'll be set for life, Tori. You and your daughter." My daughter, Lily. She was 7 years old at the time. I was a single mother. Everything I did, every late night, every weekend I sacrificed, I did for her. Marcus knew that. He used it. He knew that promising me security for Lily was the fastest way to lock me in. So I said yes. For the next 14 months, I worked like I had never worked before. I averaged 70-hour weeks. I built training modules for every single department. I hired and trained a team of 12 facilitators. I wrote scripts for role-playing exercises. I created assessment tests. I built a video library of training sessions. I flew to all 3 new locations, Chicago, Dallas, and Phoenix, and personally trained the local managers. And I trained the staff, all 300 of them. I remember one night in particular. It was 2 a.m. I was sitting in a hotel room in Dallas, surrounded by stacks of paper, and Lily was video calling me from her grandma's house. She was crying because she missed me. I cried too after I hung up, but I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that this sacrifice would give her a better life. I finished the project 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The expansion was a massive success. The new locations were performing better than projected. The training metrics were off the charts. Marcus sent a company-wide email praising the entire team and mentioned my name in the last paragraph. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the promotion. I cared about the pension. The Monday after the project wrapped, I walked into Marcus's office with a smile on my face. I had already prepared my transition plan for the vice president role. I had ideas. I was ready. Marcus didn't smile back. He was sitting behind his desk, and there was a woman standing next to him. I had never seen her before. She was young, maybe 25, dressed in an expensive suit. She had a clipboard in her hand. Marcus said, "Tori, have a seat." I sat down. He said, "I need to make some changes. The company is growing, and I've decided to restructure the leadership team. We're bringing in fresh perspectives." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I said, "Okay, how does that affect my promotion?" Marcus looked at the woman. She looked at me, and then Marcus said words that I will remember for the rest of my life. "There is no promotion, Tori. We're actually eliminating your position. This is Jennifer. She'll be taking over training operations moving forward. She has a master's degree from Stanford and experience with AI-driven learning systems. We need to modernize." I couldn't breathe. I said, "But I built the entire system. I trained 300 people. You promised me." Marcus cut me off. "Things change, Tori. Business is business. You'll receive a severance package. HR will send you the details." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He was already looking at his computer screen. I was dismissed. Just like that. 14 months of my life. 70-hour weeks. Nights away from my daughter. And he was throwing me away like a used tissue. I walked out of that office in a daze. I went to my desk, which was already being cleared out. Jennifer had people moving my things into a cardboard box. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove home in silence. I walked into my apartment, looked at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, and collapsed on the floor. That was the day I learned that promises mean nothing to people like Marcus Sterling. But I didn't know yet. I didn't know that the worst was still coming. 2 weeks passed. I stayed in bed for most of it. My mother brought Lily to school. She brought me soup that I didn't eat. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every conversation with Marcus in my head. Had I missed something? Had I done something wrong? I kept thinking that if I had just worked harder, been better, maybe he would have kept his word. That's the thing about betrayal. It makes you blame yourself first. But then the severance letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope. I opened it while drinking coffee that had gone cold. The letter was 1 page. It said that I would receive 4 weeks of pay as severance. 4 weeks? For 14 months of building an entire training department from scratch? For training 300 people? For giving up time with my daughter? 4 weeks? I laughed, not because it was funny, because I was in shock. I called HR. A woman named Carol answered. I said, "There must be a mistake. The severance is only 4 weeks?" Carol paused. Then she said, "Tori, I'm sorry, that's what Marcus approved." I said, "But he promised me a promotion. He promised me doubled pension contributions. I have emails. I have notes." Carol said, "I can't help you with that. You need to talk to Marcus." So I called Marcus. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. He didn't call back. I sent an email. He replied 3 days later with 3 words, "Talk to HR." I was being ghosted by the CEO of a company I had given everything to. That's when I checked my pension account. I had been contributing to Solaritech's pension plan for 3 years. Marcus had promised to match my contributions dollar for dollar. It was part of my original contract, and after the training project, he had promised to double the match. I logged into the pension portal, I typed in my credentials, and when the page loaded, my blood turned cold. The account was frozen. Not empty, not low, frozen. I couldn't access a single dollar. There was a message on the screen. "This account has been restricted pending administrative review. Please contact your plan administrator." I called the pension administrator. A man named David answered. I explained the situation. He put me on hold for 10 minutes. When he came back, his voice was different. Colder. He said, "Ms. Afton, I've been instructed by Solaritech leadership to inform you that your pension contributions are under review due to alleged discrepancies in your employment classification." I said, "What discrepancies? I was a full-time employee for 3 years." He said, "The company is claiming that you were a contract employee for the duration of the training project. They say your benefits were not applicable during that period, and they are freezing all funds until an investigation is complete." My hands were shaking. I said, "That's a lie. I was a W-2 employee. I have pay stubs. I have CAX documents." David said, "I'm just the messenger, Miss Afton. You'll need to take this up with Solaritech's legal team." He hung up. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at my laptop screen. My pension, the money I had saved for Lily's future, the money I had sacrificed for, frozen, because Marcus Sterling had decided to rewrite history. I called a lawyer the next day. His name was Robert Hayes. He was a small-town employment attorney with a tired face and a cheap office. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Tori, I'm going to be honest with you. Marcus Sterling is a powerful man. Solaritech has deep pockets. They will drag this out for years if you sue them, and even if you win, legal fees will eat up most of what you get." I said, "So what do I do? Just give up?" Robert said, "I'm not saying give up, I'm saying you need evidence, hard evidence, emails, recordings, documents, something that proves he promised you that promotion and those benefits. Without that, it's your word against his, and his word comes with a team of high-priced lawyers." I left his office feeling more hopeless than when I walked in. That night, I put Lily to bed. She asked me why I was sad. I told her I was just tired. She kissed my forehead and said, "It's okay, Mommy, we'll be okay." She was 7 years old, and she was comforting me. I waited until she fell asleep. Then I went to my closet, pulled out an old shoebox, and started going through every document I had saved from my time at Solaritech. Pay stubs, performance reviews, emails, meeting notes, and that's when I found it. It was an email from Marcus, dated 14 months earlier. The subject line said, "Training Project Promotion and Pension Terms." I had completely forgotten about this email. Marcus had sent it to me the day after our meeting in his office. He had written, "Tori, as discussed, upon successful completion of the 300 staff training project, you will be promoted to Vice President of Operations with a 40% salary increase. Additionally, your pension match will be doubled retroactive to the start of the project. This is our commitment to you. You are family." I read the email 5 times. Then I read it again. This was it. This was the evidence Robert had told me I needed, a written promise from Marcus himself. I forwarded the email to my personal account. I printed 5 copies. I saved it to a USB drive, and I emailed Robert Hayes. The next morning, Robert called me back. He sounded different, more awake. He said, "Tori, this email changes everything, but we have to be smart. If Marcus finds out you have this, he'll try to discredit it or claim it was a draft or something. We need to build a case before he knows we're coming." I said, "What do you need me to do?" Robert said, "I need you to go back to Solaritech, not as an employee, as a ghost. I need you to find out if Marcus has done this to anyone else, if he's frozen other pensions, if he's broken other promises, because if this is a pattern, we don't just sue him, we destroy him." I agreed, but I was terrified. Going back to that building, the place where I had given everything and lost everything, felt like walking into a battlefield unarmed. But then I thought about Lily. I thought about the future Marcus had stolen from us, and I decided that I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, when used correctly, is the most powerful weapon in the world. Going back to Solaritech wasn't easy. I couldn't just walk through the front door. I had been terminated. My access badge was deactivated. Security knew my face. I needed another way in. That's when I remembered Sarah. Sarah was a junior HR coordinator I had trained 2 years earlier. She was young, maybe 24, quiet, hardworking, and easy to overlook. I had spent hours teaching her the training systems. I had recommended her for a promotion that she got, and most importantly, Sarah owed me. I texted her. I didn't say much, just, "Coffee? I need to talk." We met at a small cafe 2 blocks from the Solaritech headquarters. Sarah looked nervous. She kept glancing at the door. I ordered a black coffee and got straight to the point. I said, "Marcus froze my pension. He's claiming I was a contractor during the training project. You know that's not true. You processed my payroll for 18 months. Sarah's face went pale. She said, "Tori, I can't get involved in this. I'll lose my job." I said, "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I just need information. Has Marcus done this to anyone else?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. She stirred her coffee, even though she hadn't put anything in it. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "There have been rumors for years. Marcus has a pattern. He brings in high performers, promises them the world, works them to the bone, and then disposes of them. He freezes their benefits. He reclassifies their employment. He makes sure they can't afford to fight back." My heart was pounding. I said, "Who else?" Sarah pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts and showed me a name, Lisa Montero. She was a regional manager. Marcus promised her equity in the company. When she delivered her numbers, he fired her and claimed the equity agreement was verbal only. She tried to sue. He buried her in legal fees for 2 years. She lost her house. I wrote down Lisa's name. Sarah gave me 2 more names, David Chen, Michael O'Brien, both senior managers, both promised promotions and benefits, both fired and frozen out. Sarah said, "There's more, but I can't tell you here. Too many people know me. If you really want to know what Marcus is hiding, you need to get into the old HR servers. There's a shared drive called Legacy Personnel. It has records going back 10 years. If anyone has been screwed over, it's in there." I said, "How do I get in?" Sarah hesitated. Then she said, "There's a security gap. Every Tuesday night, the cleaning crew comes in at 9 p.m. The security desk is understaffed between 9 and 9:30 because the night guard takes his break. If you can get past the lobby during that window, you can use the stairwell to the 3rd floor. The old HR office is still empty. The person who replaced you, Jennifer, works from the new office on the 5th floor. No one uses the 3rd floor anymore." She wrote down a door code on a napkin. "This is the backup code for the 3rd floor stairwell door. It hasn't been changed in 4 years." I took the napkin, I looked at Sarah and said, "Why are you helping me?" She looked me in the eyes and said, "Because Marcus denied my promotion last month. He gave it to someone else who didn't deserve it, and I'm tired of being afraid." That Tuesday night, I parked my car 3 blocks away from Solara Tech headquarters. I wore dark clothes, no makeup, my hair in a bun. I waited until 9:05 p.m., then I walked toward the building. The lobby was mostly empty. One security guard sat behind the desk, but he was watching something on his phone. I saw him look at the clock, then stand up and walk toward the restroom, his break. I walked through the lobby quickly, but not running. Running draws attention. I moved like I belonged there. I went straight to the stairwell door, entered the code Sarah had given me, and heard the click of the lock. I was in. The stairwell was cold and smelled like bleach. I climbed to the 3rd floor, opened the door, and stepped into the old HR office. It was exactly as Sarah had described. Empty desks, dusty computers, boxes of old files stacked against the wall. I found the computer in the corner. It was still plugged in. I pressed the power button and held my breath. The screen flickered to life. No login screen. The computer was still logged into the company network from whoever had used it last. I opened the File Explorer and searched for Legacy Personnel. It took 30 seconds to load. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. And then the folder opened. Hundreds of files. Employee records going back 10 years. Termination letters, performance reviews, internal memos. And then I found a subfolder labeled Reclassification. I opened it. There were 23 files inside, 23 former employees. Each file contained the same pattern: a promise of promotion or benefits, a completed project, a sudden termination, and a reclassification of employment status to contractor to avoid benefit payouts. Marcus Sterling had been doing this for a decade. 23 people, probably more. I was just the latest. I started downloading everything onto a USB drive. The files were large. It would take time. I sat in the dark, watching the progress bar inch forward, listening for footsteps that never came. At 9:28 p.m., the download finished. I ejected the drive,
put it in my pocket, and wiped down anything I had touched. Then I walked back to the stairwell, descended to the lobby, and walked out the front door like I was leaving a normal day at work. The security guard was back at his desk. He didn't even look up. I got into my car, drove 3 blocks away, and pulled over. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I took out the USB drive and looked at it. This was it, the proof. 23 stories of betrayal. 23 people Marcus had destroyed. But I wasn't going to destroy him. Not yet. First, I needed to meet them. I needed to hear their stories with my own ears. I needed to build an army.
The first person I called was Lisa Montero. I found her number in the files. She lived about 45 minutes outside the city in a small town I had never heard of. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. I said, "Lisa, my name is Tori Afton. I used to work at Solaritech. I think Marcus Sterling did to you what he just did to me." There was a long silence. Then Lisa said, "How did you get my number?" I said, "I found your file on the company servers. I know about the equity agreement. I know about the lawsuit. I know you lost your house." Another silence. Then Lisa said, "Where are you? I'll come to you. I don't want anyone seeing us together." We met at a diner off the highway. Lisa was older than I expected, maybe early 50s. Her hair was gray at the temples, and her hands had the roughness of someone who had been working manual labor. She ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. She told me her story, and as she spoke, I felt my anger transform into something colder, something more determined. Lisa had been at Solaritech for 7 years. 7 years. She had opened 3 new regions. She had increased revenue by 300%. Marcus had promised her 2% equity in the company, in writing. She showed me the email. It was almost identical to mine. When she delivered her results, Marcus called her into his office and told her the company was going in a different direction. He offered her a severance of 6 weeks. When she mentioned the equity agreement, he claimed it was an administrative error and that she was never eligible for equity because she was not a C-suite executive. She sued. Marcus countersued. The legal fees drained her savings. After 18 months, she settled for pennies on the dollar. She lost her house. Her marriage fell apart. She was now working as a cashier at a hardware store. Lisa looked at me and said, "I wanted to kill him. Not physically, but I wanted to destroy everything he had built. I just didn't have the proof. By the time I realized what he was doing, he had already scrubbed the servers of the evidence." I pulled out my USB drive. "I have the proof. 23 files, including yours." Lisa stared at the drive. Then she looked at me and said, "What's your plan?" I said, "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to just sue him. A lawsuit is what he expects. He has lawyers. He has money. He can drag this out for years. I need something bigger, something he can't fight." Lisa nodded. "Then you need more than files. You need witnesses, people who will testify publicly, people who will look a jury or the media in the eye and tell their stories." That's how the meetings began. Over the next 2 weeks, I tracked down everyone on that list. Some were easy to find, others had changed their names, moved across the country, or simply disappeared. But I found 17 of them. 17 people who had been promised the world by Marcus Sterling and left with nothing. David Chen was a software engineer who had built Solaritech's entire customer management system. Marcus promised him a patent share. Instead, David was fired the day after the system launched, and his name was removed from the patent. Michael O'Brien was a sales director who had landed the company's biggest client. Marcus promised him a 10% commission. Michael was fired before the commission was paid, and Marcus took the credit for the deal. A woman named Priya Kapoor had trained 200 customer service representatives. Marcus promised her a regional manager position. She was fired 3 days before the promotion was supposed to be announced. Her replacement? Marcus's nephew, who had no experience. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Promise, exploit, discard.
We started meeting in secret, different locations every time, a church basement, a public library study room, a park bench on rainy afternoons. We called ourselves the Forgotten. Corny, maybe, but it fit. During one of these meetings, David Chen said something that changed everything. He said, "Tori, you're thinking like an employee. Marcus isn't afraid of employees. He's afraid of exposure. He's afraid of the press. He's afraid of his board of directors finding out what he's been doing. If we can take this to a journalist, someone with credibility, we can force a public investigation. And once it's public, he can't hide." I said, "Do you know any journalists?" David smiled. "My sister works at the State Chronicle. She's an investigative reporter. She's been looking for a story like this for years." The next day, I met David's sister. Her name was Elena Chen. She was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time on small talk. I gave her the USB drive. I told her the stories of 17 people. I showed her Marcus's email to me. Elena looked at me and said, "This is massive, but I can't publish anything without on-the-record interviews. Are your people willing to go public, to put their names and faces on the record?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. I went back to the Forgotten. I told them what Elena had asked, and one by one, they agreed. 17 people, 17 names, 17 stories. We scheduled the interviews for the following week. Elena would record everything. The article would run in the State Chronicle, and then she would pitch it to national outlets. But Marcus must have heard something, because 3 days before the interviews, my phone rang. It was Marcus Sterling. I stared at the screen for a long time before I answered. When I did, his voice was smooth, controlled, the same voice that had promised me the world. He said, "Tori, I think we should talk." I said, "I think you should rot in hell." He laughed, actually laughed. "I know you've been talking to people. I know you have files. I know you met with a reporter. But here's the thing, Tori. I have something you don't. I have a team of lawyers who will sue you for theft of company property. Those files you took, they're confidential. You accessed them illegally. If you publish anything, I will bury you so deep that you'll never see the sun again." My blood ran cold, but I didn't let him hear it. I said, "Then I guess we'll see who has the better story, Marcus." I hung up. Marcus went into crisis mode. Solara Tech's stock dropped 11% in 2 days. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. I found out later from Sarah that Marcus was screaming at everyone, trying to figure out who had leaked the information. But the best part? He couldn't touch me. Not anymore, because now the story was out. If Marcus tried to sue me for theft, he would look like a bully trying to silence his victims. His lawyers advised him to stay quiet. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. But Marcus wasn't done. He was a fighter, and fighters don't give up just because they're losing. A week after the article was published, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from Marcus's lawyers. It was from Marcus himself, handwritten on expensive paper. He wrote, "Tori, I understand why you're angry. I made mistakes, but destroying me won't bring you peace. Let's settle this privately. Name your price. I'll pay it. Just call off the lawsuit in the press. Think about your daughter. Think about her future. Do you really want her to grow up watching her mother destroy someone?" I read the letter 3 times. Then I showed it to Robert. Robert said, "This is a good sign. He's scared. He's offering to settle. But don't take it. Not yet. The longer this goes on, the more pressure builds. His board is going to force him out if this doesn't go away." I didn't take the deal, but Marcus's words about Lily stayed with me. Was I doing the right thing? Was I putting my daughter at risk? What if Marcus retaliated in some way I couldn't predict? That night, I tucked Lily into bed. She looked up at me and said, "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Yes, baby, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be free." She didn't understand what I meant, but I did. Freedom wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge. It was about never being afraid of people like Marcus Sterling ever again. It was about showing my daughter that when someone tries to break you, you don't curl up and disappear. you stand up, you fight, and you win. The next morning, I got a call from Elena Chen. She said, "Tori, I have something you need to see. Can you come to the newspaper office?" I drove straight there. Elena was sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen. She turned the monitor toward me. It was an email, anonymous, sent from a burner account. The subject line said, "Marcus Sterling's secret accounts." The email contained bank records, dozens of pages. They showed that Marcus had been funneling company money into offshore accounts for years. Not just a little money, millions of dollars. Money that should have gone to employee pensions, money that should have gone to the people who built his company. I looked at Elena. "Who sent this?" Elena shook her head. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they just handed us the smoking gun."
The anonymous email changed everything. What we had before was a story about broken promises and stolen pensions. Important, yes, but Marcus could spin that as business disagreements or administrative errors. But this? Offshore accounts, embezzlement, fraud. This was criminal. Elena didn't publish the bank records immediately. She was too smart for that. Instead, she took them to a forensic accountant, someone who specialized in tracing financial crimes. The accountant spent 3 days analyzing the documents, and when he was done, he delivered a report that made my stomach drop. Marcus hadn't just stolen from employees. He had been siphoning money from Solaritech for nearly a decade. He had created fake vendors, submitted false invoices, and routed payments to shell companies he controlled. The total amount? Over $12 million. $12 million that should have gone to salaries, benefits, and pensions. $12 million that Marcus had used to buy a vacation home, a yacht, and a private box at a sports stadium, while people like Lisa Montero lost their houses, while people like David Chen were denied the patent share they had earned, while I was working 70-hour weeks away from my daughter. Elena went to the Solaritech board of directors with the evidence before publishing anything. She gave them 48 hours to respond, and respond they did. 48 hours later, the board issued a press release. Marcus Sterling was taking a leave of absence, effective immediately. An independent investigation would be launched, and the board promised to cooperate fully with any law enforcement agencies that wished to review the matter. Taking a leave of absence, that's what they called it, but everyone knew what it really meant. Marcus was done. I watched the press release on my phone while sitting in my kitchen. Lily was at school, the apartment was quiet, and I cried. Not sad tears, not even happy tears, just release. Months of tension, fear, and anger finally draining out of me. But I didn't celebrate, not yet, because Marcus hadn't been held accountable. Not really. A leave of absence wasn't justice. It was a PR move. I called Robert. I said, "The board is trying to sweep this under the rug. They're hoping Marcus resigns quietly and the story goes away. We can't let that happen." Robert said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want Marcus to testify, under oath in open court. I want him to look the 17 of us in the eyes and explain why he stole from us. And I want the world to watch him do it." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's going to be expensive, and it's going to take time. Marcus will fight every step of the way." I said, "I don't care. We've come this far. We're not stopping now." The lawsuit continued. Marcus's lawyers tried everything to delay, dismiss, and discredit. They filed motion after motion. They tried to get the case moved to a different jurisdiction. They tried to have me deposed for 16 hours straight, hoping I would crack. But I didn't crack. Neither did the Forgotten. We had survived worse than a deposition. And I knew in that moment that there was no turning back. I had declared war on Marcus Sterling, and one of us was going to be destroyed. The phone call with Marcus changed everything. Not because I was scared, I was terrified, but because it confirmed what I had suspected all along. Marcus knew what I was doing, and he was worried enough to call me himself. That meant I had hit a nerve. But I also knew he wasn't bluffing about the lawyers. I had accessed company servers after being terminated. That was illegal. If Marcus pressed charges, I could face fines, even jail time. And it wouldn't just hurt me, it would discredit everything the Forgotten were trying to do. I needed a different strategy, a legal one. I went back to Robert Hayes, my attorney. I showed him the USB drive, I told him about Elena Chen and the interviews, and I told him about Marcus's threat. Robert listened, then he said something that surprised me. "Tori, Marcus is right. You accessed those files illegally. If this goes to court, that evidence could be thrown out. But here's the thing. Marcus doesn't want this to go to court. He wants to intimidate you into silence, because if this story goes public, the court of public opinion is far more dangerous to him than any lawsuit." I said, "So what do we do?" Robert said, "We don't publish the files. We publish the stories, the human stories. We don't need to show a jury the documents if we have 17 people willing to testify under oath that Marcus Sterling defrauded them. And we file a class action lawsuit. Not just you, all 17 of you, together." A class action lawsuit. I hadn't even considered it. 17 people united with the same story. Marcus could bury one person in legal fees, but 17? That was a different story. Robert filed the lawsuit the next day. The legal filing was a masterpiece. It detailed each of the 17 cases. It included quotes from emails, the ones we had saved legally. It alleged fraud, breach of contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and it demanded not just financial compensation, but a public accounting of Marcus Sterling's conduct. The moment the lawsuit was filed, it became public record, and Elena Chen, true to her word, published her article the same day. The headline read, "Solara Tech CEO accused of defrauding dozens of employees. They promised us the world, then took everything." The article went viral within hours, not just locally, nationally. Other news outlets picked it up. The story was shared thousands of times on social media. People were outraged. Former employees I hadn't even found yet started coming forward, adding their names to the list. Then, 6 months after the lawsuit was filed, Marcus made a mistake. He agreed to a television interview. I don't know why he did it. Maybe his ego couldn't stand the silence. Maybe he thought he could charm his way back into the public's good graces. Maybe he just couldn't resist the spotlight. The interview was with a major news network. The journalist was a woman named Diane Reeves, tough, experienced, and not easily intimidated. Marcus walked onto the set looking confident. He wore an expensive suit. He smiled at the camera. Diane didn't smile back. She played the interview like a master. She started with soft questions: his career, his vision for Solaritech, his charitable work. Marcus relaxed. He started to believe he was in control. Then Diane said, "Mr. Sterling, I'd like to play a recording for you. This was sent to us anonymously. Can you tell us what we're hearing?" The recording played. It was a voicemail. Marcus's voicemail, from 2 years earlier. In the voicemail, Marcus was talking to someone, we never found out who, and he said, "These employees are replaceable. They think they're valuable because they work hard, but hard work doesn't matter. What matters is who controls the money, and I control everything." The studio went silent. Marcus's smile froze on his face. Diane said, "Mr. Sterling, is that your voice?" Marcus tried to recover. He said, "That's taken out of context. I was speaking hypothetically." Diane said, "Hypothetically. I see. Then perhaps you can explain the bank records we've obtained showing $12 million transferred to offshore accounts. Were those also hypothetical?" Marcus stood up. He ripped off his microphone. He walked off the set. The interview never aired in full, but clips of Marcus storming off went viral within hours. The hashtag Sterling scandal trended for days. Solaritech's stock collapsed. The board announced that Marcus had been terminated for cause, not a leave of absence, terminated.
and the FBI opened a criminal investigation into embezzlement and wire fraud. I watched Marcus's downfall from my living room. Lily was sitting next to me eating cereal, not really understanding what was happening. I pulled her close and held her. She said, "Mommy, why is that man on TV?" I said, "Because he made some bad choices, baby, and now he has to face the consequences." She nodded, like that made perfect sense, and in a way, it did. Section 7. The Reckoning. Approximately 1,300 words. Marcus Sterling was arrested 3 weeks after the interview. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it from Elena. She called me at 6 a.m., her voice electric with excitement. "Tori, they've got him. FBI agents picked him up at his vacation home. He's in federal custody." I sat down on my bed. My legs felt weak. I had imagined this moment 100 times, but the reality was different. There was no triumph, no celebration, just a quiet sense of finality. The criminal case against Marcus was separate from our civil lawsuit, but the two cases fed into each other. The evidence we had gathered, the emails, the testimonies, the bank records, was used by federal prosecutors to build their case. Marcus was charged with 12 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, and 1 count of money laundering. He pleaded not guilty. Of course he did. His lawyers argued that the offshore accounts were legitimate business expenses and that the employee promises were aspirational, not contractual. But the jury didn't buy it. After a trial that lasted 6 weeks, Marcus Sterling was found guilty on all counts. I watched the verdict from the gallery of the courtroom. I sat in the back row next to Lisa Montero. She was crying. So was I. Behind us, the other members of the Forgotten filled 3 rows. 17 people who had been told they didn't matter. 17 people who had just been vindicated. The judge sentenced Marcus to 12 years in federal prison. 12 years, 1 year for every $1 million he stole. He was also ordered to pay restitution, not just to the company, but to the employees he had defrauded. The restitution wasn't enough to give Lisa back her house. It wasn't enough to give David back the years he lost fighting for his patent. It wasn't enough to give me back the nights I missed with Lily. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what Marcus had done was wrong, that we were not replaceable, that our hard work mattered. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into a crowd of reporters. They shouted questions at me. "Tori, how do you feel? What's next for you? Do you forgive Marcus Sterling?" I stopped at the top of the steps. I looked at the cameras, and I said, "I don't know about forgiveness, but I do know that no one should ever have to go through what we went through. If this case stops even one CEO from stealing from their employees, then it was worth it." Then I walked away. I got into my car, drove to Lily's school, and picked her up early. We went to the park, we ate ice cream, we swung on the swings until the sun went down. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Marcus Sterling. I was thinking about my daughter, about our future, about the life we were going to build now that the nightmare was over. The restitution money arrived 6 months after Marcus was sentenced. It wasn't the full amount he had stolen. Much of the offshore money was never recovered, but it was enough to give me a fresh start. I used part of it to pay off my debts. I used another part to start a small consulting business, helping employees document their promises and protect their rights, and I put the rest into a college fund for Lily. The Forgotten stayed in touch. We formed a bond that couldn't be broken. Lisa Montero went back to school and became a paralegal. David Chen started a nonprofit that helps tech workers fight for patent rights. Michael O'Brien wrote a book about his experience, a bestseller, surprisingly. And me? I found something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, the kind that comes from knowing you stood up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when you were scared, even when the person on the other side had more money, more power, and more lawyers. I learned something through all of this, something I want every person watching to understand. Promises are not just words. When someone makes you a promise, especially in writing, especially about your livelihood, your future, your family, that promise has weight. That promise is a contract, And if someone breaks it, you have the right to fight back. But fighting back doesn't mean becoming like them. It doesn't mean stooping to their level. It means using the tools you have, the truth, the evidence, the people who believe in you, to build something stronger than their lies. Marcus Sterling thought he was untouchable. He thought money and power would protect him. He thought we would just go away, too scared or too tired to fight. He was wrong. He was wrong because he forgot something important. He forgot that companies are made of people, that profits come from human effort, that every desk, every computer, and every training manual is built by someone who has a name, a family, a story. And when you betray those people, you don't just break a contract, you break a trust. And broken trust, once exposed, cannot be repaired with lawyers or PR statements or offshore accounts. Marcus is in prison now. I don't think about him very often, but when I do, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel something closer to pity, because he had everything: a successful company, a reputation, the respect of his peers, and he threw it all away because he wanted more money, more control, more power. And in the end, he lost everything. I, on the other hand, gained something. I gained my voice. I gained my confidence. I gained a community of people who went through hell together and came out the other side. And I gained something else, something I didn't expect. One night, about a year after the trial, Lily asked me a question. She was 9 years old by then, old enough to understand more than I realized. She said, "Mommy, was it worth it? All the hard stuff you went through?" I thought about it. I thought about the sleepless nights, the fear, the moment I walked into that empty office and downloaded those files, the phone call from Marcus, the trial, the media. And I looked at my daughter and I said, "Yes, baby, it was worth it. Because now you know something important. You know that when someone hurts you, you don't have to just take it. You can stand up, you can fight, and you can win." She smiled, she hugged me, and then she went back to her homework. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just my victory, it was hers too, because everything I did for her. And now she would grow up knowing that her mother was not a victim. Her mother was a fighter. So here I am, Tori Afton, 34 years old, single mother, survivor, fighter. I don't have Marcus's money. I don't have his yacht or his vacation home or his private box at the stadium, but I have something he will never have again.
I have my freedom, I have my integrity, and I have my daughter. The consulting business I started has grown more than I ever imagined. I've helped dozens of employees document their promises and protect their rights. I've testified in 3 other cases similar to mine. I've spoken at conferences about employment fraud and worker protections. And every time I tell my story, someone comes up to me afterward and says, "Thank you. I was going to give up, but now I'm not." That's why I'm telling this story today, not for revenge, not for attention, but for the person watching this who feels trapped, who feels like the system is rigged against them, who feels like fighting back is pointless. I want you to know it's not pointless. Marcus Sterling had everything on his side: money, power, lawyers, connections, and I still won. Not because I'm special, because I had the truth. And the truth, when you shine a light on it, is more powerful than any lie. If you're going through something similar, here's what I learned. First, document everything. Save emails, take screenshots, keep a journal. Evidence is your weapon. Second, find your people. You are not alone. There are others who have been hurt by the same person or the same system. Find them, talk to them, build something together. Third, don't be afraid of the law. Lawyers are expensive, but there are resources: legal aid, pro bono services, contingency fee arrangements. Do your research, ask for help. And finally, take care of yourself. This is hard, it's exhausting. It will test you in ways you can't imagine, but you are stronger than you know. And on the other side of this fight, there is peace. I didn't set out to destroy Marcus Sterling. I just wanted what I was promised:
I wanted to provide for my daughter. I wanted to be treated with dignity. In the end, I got more than that. I got my voice back. And once you have your voice, no one can ever take it from you again. My name is Tori Afton. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I fought back against the man who tried to break me. I won, and so can you.